I won't.
Should I do the optimal viewing run through again?
Okay. It's
So for those of you who would just like to see tonight's moderator and panelists, if you have not yet, hover over your Zoom screen in the bottom left, you'll see something that looks like a video camera. Next to that is an up caret. Click the up caret, you'll see something that says video settings. Select video settings, it opens a secondary window, and somewhere on that screen under video, you should see a way to toggle on hide all non-video participants. So that will hide every window for you that does not have a camera going. So theoretically, once the two Lauries have turned off our cameras, you will only see the moderator and the panelists. And then on Zoom, you would want to pick gallery view in the upper right-hand corner, and then you'll see them all 5 at one time. And I think that's it for my spiel.
okay.
Oh, also one more thing. If you have questions for tonight's panelists, I will monitor them. Please drop them in the chat in all caps, so I will see them, and then I'll keep track of them. And at the end of the of tonight's panel, I'll make sure that those are provided to the moderator and the panelists. All right. Thanks very much.
Super. All right, there we go. I will then start recording. I know. Cancel. Laurie, I think that you paused the recording, so you need to. There. Okay. Technical difficulties. Good evening. Welcome to night 6 of Mystery Week, an annual celebration of crime writing from the NorCal chapter of Mystery Writing, which has been empowering mystery writers and encouraging mystery readers since 1945. I'm Laurie King, NorCal's current president, and I encourage you to join us both in our many events that are available to the public and in becoming a member. We also have a number of events that are only open to members. Look at our website, mwanorcal.org, where you can find a list of upcoming events and member benefits. And you can watch our Facebook page for a series of live talks and panels. Tonight's panel is on a highly suitable job for a woman. And our moderator is the lovely Heather Haven. Heather is a NorCal board member. She has been a joy to have on the board. She is a fabulous writer who writes more books than I can keep track of, all of which are the sorts of things that really need to get you through a pandemic. So thank you so much, Heather, and I will turn it away to you. Good night.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much for what you said. The check is in the mail. Okay. What I want to do is introduce all of my 4 fabulous panelists, and I'm going to ask them as I say their name to kind of go hi and wave, because this is audio driven and there may be 1 or 2 people who may get confused as to who's who. Saul, I can't imagine it, but you never know. So anyway, that's what I'm going to ask you to do. We're going to start, I'm going to do an alpha. So Daisy Bateman, wave, say hi.
Hi, I'm here.
That's it, see it flip to her, good. Daisy Bateman is a mystery lover, cheese enthusiast, and a world-renowned expert in why you should buy that. And I'm gonna have to find out what that is. Murder Goes to Market is Daisy's first book in the Marketplace Mystery Series, featuring former computer programmer turned locavore. How do you say that? Locavore?
Locavore, that sounds right.
Oh, good. All right. Market owner Claudia Simcoe debuted June of 2020. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She has a degree in molecular biology and what passes for normal life. She works in biotech. Daisy lives in Alameda, California with her husband and a cat, only one of whom wears a tuxedo on a regular basis, and a puppy on a mission to chew the world into tiny pieces. Welcome, Daisy.
Thank you.
Kara Black. Say hi, Kara. Everybody knows who you are.
Bonsoir. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. Bonsoir. Author of the Ami Leduc Mysteries and the recently debuted 3 Hours in Paris with protagonist Kate Reese is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author. Kara has received multiple nominations for the prestigious Anthony and McCavity Awards, a Washington Post Book World Book of the Year citation, and received, I'm going to try and say this in French, the Médaille de la Ville de Paris, the Paris City Medal, awarded in recognition of her contribution to international culture. Kara loves all things French, and they love her. Robin Bursell, where's my Robin? There you are, darling. Say hi, Robin.
Hi.
So beautiful. That's it. New York Times bestselling author Robin Bursell moonlighted as a cop for nearly 3 decades while working as a mom full-time. I'm exhausted. Anyway, she
One of those was easier than the other.
Okay. And international thrillers until Clive Cussler asked her to co-write with him in the Fargo series, where the good guys sometimes skirt the law, but always save the day. You can visit her at robinbursell.com. Okay, so she didn't want me to say this, but I want you to know she's won 2 Anthony Awards, 1 Barry Literary Award, 1 McCavity, and 1 book was named Library Journal's Best Book of 2014. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you. And that was a nomination from McCavity. I'd love to have won it, but darn it.
Well, I let me in the room, so that's a winner as far as I'm concerned. Okay,
I saw Janet Rudolph in the audience, so I had to make sure I.
Essay, Saul, LeChuck's first book featuring bookseller and private investigator Nikki Griffin, Save Me from Dangerous Men, was named a US Today best-selling book of 2019. Book List Top 10 Crime Debut of 2019, a Kirkus Best Mystery Thriller of 2019, and a Hudson Booksellers Best of the Year. I need a breath after that. His second book, One Got Away, debuts April 2021. He holds a BA in English from Amherst College and a master's degree from Dartmouth College. He be bright, okay? He divides his time between Oakland, California and Hanover, New Hampshire, where he teaches graduate creative writing at Dartmouth College. As a side note, his series is under option for film and television. Welcome, Saul. Now, do you want me to call you Saul or do you want me to call you SA?
You can call me Saul. We'll save the essay for the book covers.
That works. Okay. Well, welcome to all of you. It's a fabulous group of people here. Thank you so much. All right. So now I'm going to start off the questions. And to steal from another wonderful writer, Camille Minicino, what's a nice person like you doing writing about murder? Or what drew you into writing murder mysteries? And Kara, why don't we start with you, my darling?
Okay, dear Heather. Well, I mean, that's so funny that Camille said that because we know she's one of the nicest people there is, and she's an ex-nun, so, or former nun, excuse me. So I don't know, I think it was actually my dad. When my dad retired, he would go to the library on Saturday and he would take out 7 books and he would read a book a day because he had time, right? And he was reading mysteries and he was always telling me, this is really good. And I was really, oh, Dad, no, I was thinking like, oh, Nancy Drew, I read that under the covers with a flashlight like everyone else. But, I kept thinking it's not really something I wanted to write. But, when I started looking at those, and I think probably I read a Sue Grafton, Kinsey Malone, many years ago. And I really liked that here was a woman who was, strong and vulnerable. And I don't know, I sort of like how she sort of took care of business, took no prisoners. And I realized the more mysteries I read that they weren't just about, who done it. It's about social issues, so, you can explore society because I think in a way we're trying to figure out, what's happening. I mean, who knows what books are going to come out after
after this year, right? But we're kind of, I think for me, it was about exploring society and different socioeconomic groups. And, you know, usually I like the stories that, you know, we solved them pretty much. You know, I'm more attracted to that than noir, where, you know, it just spirals and goes downhill. I want some kind of resolution, and I like that.
What about you, Daisy? What about you? What brought you into murder mysteries?
Not dissimilar, actually. It was also my parents. I was a little bit younger when, but all the time I was growing up, my parents just nonstop reading murder mysteries and leaving them around the house and in the bathroom. And I would pick them up and start reading them. I think Charlotte McLeod was the first mystery writer I started to read. Probably, I mean, I read Encyclopedia Brown as a younger kid, obviously. Never really did Nancy Drew very much, but yeah, probably I was 11 or 12 when I started reading those, and I just kind of never looked back. It's always been my favorite kind of story. So.
What about you, Robin?
Well, I guess it sort of ran in the blood a little bit that, you know, everybody in my family, my mom, my dad, my older sister, read mysteries, so it seemed a natural progression. But you know, when I started writing, I didn't write mysteries to begin with. I was a police officer, and the last thing I wanted to do was write what I did. So you know, you work all day. It's not that there were that many murders going on in my little town here, but you know, you're dealing with police stuff, and it's like, oh, and I want to try on the computer and write about police stuff. So I actually started off thinking, okay, one, because I thought it was going to be easy. It wasn't. Writing a romance. And it wasn't until one of my friends said, have you read Patricia Cornwell? And I said, no. And she says, you need to read her because I think you could do what she does. And so, you know, I read her books, and her early books were fabulous, I think. The first five. And before she, you know, did her weird, kind of went over, jumped the shark in her series, in my opinion. I think, and somebody was talking about exploring Kara was exploring social issues. And I think, you know, she was exploring these things. So it kind of like edged me, okay, I don't want to do that. So I did the romance, but then I went back to it because being a police officer, I thought, okay, this seems like a natural fit. So maybe I should try to do this. And then what I found was that it was very cathartic. So I could have the worst day in the world on the street, you know, arresting some bad guys, and most of the bad stuff was the people I worked with. I was the first female officer. So that was tough. And when I started writing about this female officer who was having the same problems that I was having with her male coworkers, all of a sudden it was like, oh, you know what? I could kill somebody off and nobody can do a thing about it. So this is fun. So that's how I got my start.
What about you, Saul?
So I grew up in the middle of New Hampshire, in the middle of the woods, and on dirt road, and we didn't have much going on in terms of activities for a young boy to pursue. But we did have a library in town, and I became what you could call a regular there. Spent an awful lot of time there growing up. And that's where I first discovered some of my, to this day, favorite authors, like, you know, Chandler and, you know, Patricia Highsmith and Ross McDonald and, you know, Dashiell Hammett. And I read them, and suddenly I was introduced to California, for example, long before I ever saw it in person, let alone move there. And what a kind of delicious and seedy underbelly for a teenage boy to run into. And when I wasn't in the library, I was running around the woods because, again, there wasn't all that much to do. And I was thinking about these characters, and I was thinking about these situations, and I was just increasingly, you know, enchanted by them, by these worlds that these writers could bring, and by these, you know, ecosystems, and by these cities that they could deliver, and these landscapes that they could paint. And to me, it was kind of extraordinary. And in the back of my mind, I think even then, I was thinking about how amazing it would be, how delicious it would be to be able to, you know, strike off my own in some way and give that genre a shot. So I think it was always in my mind. And I was, you know, I think the fundamental idea of, you know, this genre of the scales being off and needing to be righted is a pretty appealing one, you know, on a fairly universal level, because I think we all like to think that justice is out there somewhere. And I was thinking about it recently in the last couple of years, reading these terrible and grim headlines about, you know, the opioid crisis, and particularly what the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma have managed to do to the very fabric of the country, you know, with tens of thousands of deaths. And it's outrageous. And I don't think that Sacklers much care what I think about them, or, you know, an op-ed that I could write about them or anything like that. But I find in fiction that, sure, I can take a family of pharmaceutical billionaires, and in some small way, I can try to write the scales in a couple hundred pages within that moment. And to me, that's a pretty satisfying endeavor to do. So I think that fiction really does allow me in that way to connect on a genuine level with the real world and what's out there, the good as well as the bad. And this being mystery and suspense, of course, there's plenty of bad.
And you're shining a light on the truth. That's what fiction does. It shines a light on the truth. But now, so all of the people that you mentioned earlier, like Hammett and all of that, write basically male protagonists. Yet you've come up, I think your first time out, with this incredible woman, this protagonist whose name is Nikki. And so I want to know, what made you choose a woman to write about, making her the protagonist of your book instead of a man? What made you do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I ask myself that on occasion. I think, you know, Nikki came to me in a bout of insomnia at about 3 a.m. I was tossing and turning in bed one night, and by the time I managed to get back to sleep at about dawn, I had this very vague, opaque, but, you know, slowly forming idea for a character. And the central idea was that this was a woman who ran a bookstore by day and did vigilante work by night, and had this kind of backstory that she had some terrible things happen to her in her youth, but was not dark and was not kind of a Terminator of a character, and was not damaged irreparably or anything like that, and still had a lot of love and a lot of emotion in her. And the toughness was absolutely one aspect, but it was not her defining aspect. And so you know, when coming up with any character, any story, and I'm sure everyone here would agree with me, you toss around the idea from all possible angles and think, you know, shake it, and, you know, what can work and what might not work, turn the thing upside down. And to me, I from the very first moment, from literally the first hour that I thought of the character and thus the story, and it was in that order, I couldn't imagine Nikki being a man. It didn't feel like it worked for the character. And I think that if I had tried to make her a male, although it might have been ostensibly at the very beginning easier for me to do, just in terms of thinking less, at the same time, I think the character would have fallen flat, and I would never have been true to the character I imagined, the woman that I was, you know, thinking about. So, you know, I was very fortunate to have a, you know, female agent and two amazing female editors, you know, who just have given me a ton of support, you know, with the character and the formation of this story. But yeah, from that very beginning, I think that there were aspects to Nikki that wouldn't translate over by making her male instead of female. And I think that if I tried to do that, it would have been a pretty poor mess of things.
Robin, you're listening to him. You write male and female protagonists, right? Is there a difference between writing a woman and writing a man? What's your approach to each one?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it takes most men that I know, you can definitely tell, and I can't say most men, but let's go with a lot of men, Sal being an exception here, because I think it's rare for a man to be able to write a female lead well. So they tend to fall on stereotypes, and you see it, especially if there's like sex scenes in there, or they're describing a woman, you know, that sort of thing. And what I found, one of the reasons I was brought on to the Cussler books was they're about the Sam and Remy Fargo series, and Remy is Sam's husband. They're multimillionaires. And the previous two writers, Clive felt that they were getting a little into the stereotypical, you know, guy's vision of a woman. And he said it wasn't ringing true. And so he was looking for somebody who could write a strong woman. And they thought, okay, maybe we're going to have to get a woman to write a strong woman. And, but then therein lies a danger, you know, but can a woman write a strong man? And so that was what his goal was, to find somebody who could do both. And so when he saw my books, he decided that I fit that bill. So it's not to say that a man can't write a woman and a woman can't write a man, but I think we can all safely say that women are different from men. It's the Venus Mars thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Daisy? This is your first book out, right?
The
But
first
have
book has been released, yes. I've written short stories with male protagonists, but they were more on the ridiculous end of the spectrum, so I'm not sure I got deeply into the character. I don't know. I do think that it's not necessary that would be naturally easier for women to write men, but so much of culture, pop culture, high culture, whatever, centers the male point of view, that as women, we're just so used to reading. So there's nothing that should stop a man from learning as much about the female point of view as every woman learns about the male point of view for pretty much her whole life.
Well,
I mean, you know, 90% of superhero movies are boys' journey to man. All of Spielberg's oeuvre is fathers and sons. Every great American novel is some dude staring up his own butthole. I mean, we've got the education built in. So, and I think men writing women have to put a little bit more effort into learning the same things.
Well, Kara, you have this fabulous male who continues to go through the dwarf. At the moment his name has escaped me, but he is such a wonderful character. Do you find that writing about him as a male, that he's a man, is different than when you write about Ami?
Probably, I agree with what Robin and Daisy have said. I agree with all that. But if we're talking about Renee, who is a dwarf, who is vertically challenged, or whatever the right term is, Amy needed, when I first started writing, Amy needed like a sidekick, a partner, someone who, the Watson to the Holmes, but needed someone else because it couldn't all be through her. And so, Renee came to me, from when I was a preschool teacher, and I was on a committee to hire a preschool teacher, and we had several applicants, and one of the applicants was a dwarf, and she was, she had all the qualifications. But I remember thinking, in preschool, when you work with kids, you've got to lift things. I mean, it's hard work, it's physical, and a lot of our 4-year-olds were about as tall as she was. And I did not vote for her. We all voted and we picked another person. It was when I went to a preschool meeting, like we used to have one down at the Embarcadero, and I went there, and I went early to the meeting because I knew the art teacher was doing this really cool project, and I wanted to go steal something, right? Steal an art project, as you do. And I went there, and they're all sitting at the table, and they all had their smocks on, and they're really engaged, and they're doing big stuff with their hands. And I was looking for the teacher, and I was looking, and the teacher was at the table with the kids with a smock. It was the woman we did not hire, who was there working with the kids. They were totally engaged. They were like really into it. They were respectful. We had sort of a Montessori thing. So they were bringing materials and putting them away, and they were amazing. And I was like, I really felt terrible. I felt guilty. First of all, I was looking at her disability, not her ability. And
Right.
I was looking at what those kids were learning from her, those incredible life lessons that you can't, that are just there. And I thought our kids missed out on that. And I just really think when Renee appeared in the book on the page. He was my character to assuage my guilt, you know, but it was
That-
kind
that-
of to work it through, because he has so much, you know, he's incredible and he has so much to give and be smart, and he's in love with Amy, and it was always, everything was hard for him. So it didn't matter if he was a man or a woman. I was thinking of his motivation, you know, and who he was. And so I had a more universal feeling, you know. I don't know if I sort of answered your question there, but
You answered also another one. I think you're one of the first people to put a person with a disability as a running character in a series. I think you are. If anybody knows of anybody else who's done it, I'd love to have it in the comments to see.
well, Penny
So-
does, right, with her hearing impaired
Yeah.
detective. But yeah.
Okay, good, fantastic. So do you believe a strong woman's character earns the reader's empathy when she has like a full complement of problems and this and that, just like a man? Do you think that that is something that people relate to, even men, when they're reading your books? What do you think, Robin?
Yes. No.
Oh, good.
No.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think, well, I think it comes back to character is key, and you have to write a full-fleshed character. So when someone reads about a woman, I think when a woman reads about a woman, you know, I'm going to go back to the Patricia Cornwell books. When I was reading Kay Scarpetta, and this was my first foray after having put down mysteries for years. It was like, here's this strong woman who is in a male-dominated job and has to deal with men who are in command, and she is smart, talented. You know, she's got everything going for her. And I remember now why I stopped reading hers, because she killed off whoever the love interest was at the time, and that really pissed me off. But anyways, but it was like, this is something that a woman could read, and you could aspire to, maybe not be a pathologist, but you could aspire to be a strong woman who's going to take charge even when society says that you shouldn't be doing that. So so to me, I think that's what I always tried to do with my female protagonists. I wanted young women to read them, and regardless that they were doing a different profession, that they would think, oh, I could be something. I don't have to be what society tells me I have to be. So
What about you, Daisy? What do you think?
I mean, I think anyone can earn empathy. I mean, you don't automatically get it. Obviously, you have to write. It has to be a character that people connect to. I'm not. Yeah, it is true that women, certainly in reality and probably in fiction, get judged more harshly for flaws.
Yeah, I think
frequently.
I think, yeah.
But it's also the case that you have to have a character who has things about her or him, anyone, that, because, you know, if you tried to write a character everyone would think was terrific, you would write a very boring character and nobody would like it at all. So
You didn't believe it. I don't think they believe it at all.
you wouldn't have a very good story anyway.
No.
So
Kara, Amy is just this fabulous person, and she has some flaws. Did you just find those, or did you deliberately write them into what you wanted her to be? Did you seek them out, or did they just come to you?
Well, of course, Amy is taller, thinner, you know, and chicer, and has a better apartment than I do in Paris on Ile Saint-Louis. So we give her that, okay? But her apartment, you know, it has 17th century plumbing. You know, you put the hairdryer on and you plug something in and it diffuses blue. So I wanted to show what I saw in Paris of living, you know, it's not, what do we have now? Emily in Paris, or what is that, Emily in Paris? So,
yeah.
you know,
Emma, I think, or something like that.
You know, right? The next, I mean,
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like really? Okay, it's not like that, but that's sort of the stereotypical view. I just wanted to write about a Parisian woman, my friends, who, you know, okay, they look great. They're chic. They have a wonderful sense of humor. They have these great jobs. And then I would meet them, like after work, I met my friend and she sat down, you know, she has her lipstick just right. And she's like sitting there with her heels. And she said to me, oh, I had a terrible day. And I said, what happened? She goes, he left me. And I was like, oh my God, a man left you? I mean, you know what I mean? At first, the gut reaction, it was like, oh my God. But yeah, she was with this creep anyway, and that was over and done with. But, you know, it's like there's always another side to something. You know, what we think is beautiful or gorgeous or stereotypical, you know, is not really true. And I mean, the French women I meet are very natural and very earthy, you know, and they can just put themselves together in this two-souled look. But when I first started writing these stories in the 90s, I think I had been influenced a lot by, remember Jane Tennyson, Prime Suspect, which speaks to some things Robin was saying about, you know, in a man's world, because in the 90s, I mean, a lot of women were not on the force or in a position of authority. So I was going to give Aimee Leduc an inherited detective agency based on a real one, and a woman I met who did inherit a detective agency. And I was going to show her do something, you know, because her father had all these connections, the old boy network, you know, the Parisian cops. And boy, is that hard to get into. So she was always butting heads because as a PI, you have to try and get information. But she didn't, you know, she didn't really want to work with them. So I wanted her to do something cutting edge, computer security, which was in the 93, 94. I mean, there were 3 firms in the country doing that. So I wanted to give her something. Also, I didn't know anything about computers, so I could learn with her. But I think it's also taking a stereotype, you know, or what the Parisian woman or whatever, they're not Vogue models, and kind of turning it on its head, you know, which makes it interesting and fresh to me.
Yeah. Well, where are you, Saul? I have a question for you. What are the challenges for you writing a female protagonist, and how do you know when you've got it right?
Gosh, well, the second one is certainly a work in progress and probably will be for the rest of my life. All I can do is hope and cross my fingers that I can, you know, pull it off and as best I can. I think that when I think about the challenges, I mean, I suppose that I'd break them up into like 2 rough categories. One being more challenging than the second. So the first is simply what we could call like the superficial. And that's just basically a set of questions that, you know, if you're a man writing a female protagonist or vice versa, just a basic set of questions that you have to ask yourself in terms of, you know, what clothing might you put on in the morning? You know, what might you, you know, be thinking about, like when you get onto the subway, when you walk into a bar, might people be, you know, looking at you differently if you're one gender or another? So like, I think the superficial things are fairly easy to do because you don't need a lot of them. You don't have to put 10, you know, mentions of what shoes you're wearing on every page, right? It's just enough to keep the readers there with you. I think that you know, more fundamentally, like, how might a man versus a woman think about the same situation if they walked into a room, right? How might they, you know, perceive things? One of the things that I try to play with in my first book is the idea, for example, of, you know, like the male gaze, right? Like one of the thing Nikki does is intentionally kind of subverts that and uses that because sometimes she'll appear to people as they expect her to appear and play into that stereotype that they might have. And obviously she's doing that for a very specific reason and usually ends up getting something important to her because of that. So if she goes in and she's playing the sexy single girl at a bar, or, you know, putting quarters in the jukebox or something like that, generally speaking, it's because she wants something out of that situation. And I like to kind of like play with and subvert the male gaze and what people are going to be doing, you know, coming up to her. So I think that I think it factors into all kinds of ways, right? Even something like a fight scene. I mean, I think that people are I think an average audience is harder on females in some ways, right? If you're talking about a subject like violence, I think that you can get away with a lot more if you have a male character who's going bare knuckles with, a room full of people or something like that. And I think you have to maybe try harder. You have to really ground it in realism, or maybe use a little more, intellect as opposed to just bare knuckles brawn. But you have to keep your readers there with you, of course. And I think there are, situations that demand more of that. So when I think about writing a female character, those are kind of the two places I try to get my mind. I think that the helpful thing is that when you're writing a book, that's kind of all you're thinking about in some ways, right? I used to tell people that I probably, spend more time with Nikki, the character, than anyone except my cat. Right. And, I'm constantly having her in my head and thinking about when I'm walking around during the day, right? How would she be perceiving this situation? How would she be reacting to this situation? What might she say in this exchange of dialogue? And when you have someone who really is inhabiting your head pretty close to 24/7, go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it, then over time, I think you start to become familiar how that person would act and react, whatever their gender is.
I think that's true. I think all three of the ladies here, when you're writing, you probably carry these women around with you 24/7. Am I right? I mean, when do you let them go?
When the book goes away.
Well, Kara, you have been writing the same female protagonist, Amy, for years. How long have you been writing her? How long?
Well, there's 19 books, so about 20 years.
Oh.
So it was, yeah.
I was just going to say, how much has she changed from the beginning to 20 years later? Has she grown the way most people grow, or do you, as her writer and being more literary, do you keep that back a little bit? How do you deal with that? This person she's 20 years with you, for heaven's sakes, right? That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like Saul, yeah, I go to bed with her. Actually, when I started writing this, when I wrote this standalone thriller, his 3 Hours in Paris, and got a new character, I have to say I felt like I was having an affair, with my new character. It was, I felt very guilty. I was writing, I was like leaving her, a woman I've lived with for more than 20 years. So finally, and that's my editor said, you think you're having an affair, don't you? You think you're betraying her. And she goes, get over it and go back to her. And I went, okay, that works. So that really helped me, to write something different. But yes, Amy Leduc, we meet her in my first book. It was set, the story took place 1993. And last year, the 19th book, we were in 1999. So it's about 6 years into her life. I've just slowly aged her because I didn't even know I was writing a series. But what's changed is some of her dynamics. Of course, with Renee, there's always this back and forth about her mother who had disappeared, finding out about her father's, the secrets about her father and her godfather. About 5 books ago, she was pregnant, she had a baby. So a lot of that's been raising the baby, running the detective agency, trying to have a love life, dealing with the father of the child. So that's sort of changed her. So she's been going into uncharted territory for her, again, still being a detective and running an agency. So that what's interesting now is that the next book, next year, the next Amy Leduc, so I have to get this right. It comes out in 2021 and it will be set right after 9/11 in Paris. So what was that, 2001?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're still paying in francs because the euro was 2002. So it'll be dealing with the kind of repercussions and what was happening in France after 9/11, because there were a lot of things. And we start off at the birthday party of her daughter, Chloe, who's now 3 years old. So now Chloe can walk, she's going to preschool. So there's a whole other, so that's kind of Amy's journey as a mother, has changed. So that's probably more detailed than you wanted, but now she's, become a mother and she's changed, but we're still with the biological father, the issues. So that's been really interesting to explore that, you know, and to
Yeah, I
take,
bet.
and to take Amy, you know, shopping and buying little girl clothes has been really fun in Paris.
Well, Robin, are you writing 4 different female protagonists? I know you have the Streets of San Francisco, but that's a male, correct?
Yeah, they're both male. Yes.
They're both male, right? So
Yeah.
you have 3 female protagonists. How do you keep them straight? And how are they different for you? How do you make them grow? How do you keep them straight? That's probably a good question. Right
Well,
there.
that is a good question. Interestingly, okay, the first series was Kate Gillespie, San Francisco PD, and that was a first person series. There's four books in that series. And then I went over to Sydney Fitzpatrick, who's an FBI agent and a forensic artist. And in that series, there's 5 books. And that series is third person, multiple point of view. So I went from first person to third person, which was kind of interesting. And it took a little while to kind of get that out of the first person out of your system. And then it was fine, no problem. Well, then I did the Streets of San Francisco, which were the 2 male characters based on the Streets of San Francisco TV series. And that was no problem at all. But then I decided the next book, this was prior to getting the call from Clive that he wanted to do this, have me co-write in this series. So I was going to do a book that combined Kate Gillespie and Sydney Fitzpatrick, thinking, oh, this would be fun if they get together in a book and, you know, have some mystery that, you know, comes into play. And so I'd be writing about Sydney because I just got done 2 books ago writing about her. So that was no problem. But, you know, Kate was like 5 books ago. And as soon as she comes on scene, I started writing in first person. It was just, you know, these characters are so clear in your head that
Yeah.
it was automatic. And all of a sudden she'd be saying, I walked into the room and I saw the man with the gun and I this and I that. It's like, whoa, you know, so that was a bit difficult. And then, you know, I got pulled from that because I did the Cussler thing. And so now I'm back to third person, multiple point of view, and, you know, Sam and Remy Fargo. So male, female, which is also interesting. And so what I do try to do is balance them. Sam's the star. Clive's big thing was he wants Sam center stage, but his other big thing and the reason why he hired me was he wanted Remy to be, you know, not oh, I need a spa day. He wanted her to be a badass, and like she was in the original books.
Did he want Remy to be Sam's equal? Is that what he wanted?
Oh, absolutely. He wanted her to be Sam's equal. He says, we want her front and center. It's like, awesome, I can do this. So I set about writing in the first book, which was Pirate, and I turned it, you know, what I've done to him and these scenes and stuff. And he's like, whoa. He says, what happened to Sam? And I said, well, you wanted Remy to be this badass. He goes, yeah, but Sam's the star. She can't be this badass and put Sam in the back seat. And so I had to kind of rein back on Remy a little bit. And so, you know, learning how to balance the two to make sure Sam is front and center, but she is absolutely his equal in every way.
Wow. Okay, so Daisy, first of all, I love Claudia. I really do. I think you've got a very wonderful character there. How did you come up with her? How much is she like you? Where you see her going?
She is quite a lot like me, actually. She has a different profession and she's a few years younger, but yeah, no, I basically wrote myself into a book, except for she makes some decisions that I wouldn't, like deciding to move to the coast to open an artisan marketplace and deciding to solve a murder, neither of which I've ever really even considered. So yeah, no, I like writing her because you get to say all the things that you would have said if you'd thought of them. And in terms of where she's going, that's you know, she's just starting out on her journey. So I have kind of some ideas of relationship wise what's going to happen with her. And I think she's going to grow into her position as a businesswoman. She's in her mid-30s now, and just kind of finding her legs as in this new career she's chosen for herself. I think she's going to learn as she goes, and develop into kind of more of a leader, I think, and I think also grow in the community that she's kind of building around her. That is, those people will be more integrated into her life as the years go by.
You're writing the second book of the series now.
I'm currently writing the second book of the series, yes.
Right, and you have heard that Kara has 19 books out with Amy, and Robin has 5 and 6 and 4 and all that. Do you have is there anything in your mind that any advice that you'd like to ask either one of these powerhouse writers? Anything that comes to your mind that you would like to know that they do that you might want to do or emulate?
Well, one thing I could use some advice on is, how do you describe your character every time they appear in a new book? Because I had a little trouble the first time, and she can't come across that many reflective surfaces. So
I don't know about, I mean, that's something you have to be clever about. But what I did that I think, and possibly Kara does too, I have a Bible. And so every time I have recurring characters, I put, or recurring things, like in my Sidney Fitzpatrick, they worked in the Washington Recorder, which was a really undercover CIA type newspaper. But it's where they did all their spy stuff. And so you've got to describe this building and what it's like, and the fact that, it's this top secret thing every single time. And what drives me up a wall, and I've seen it done before, is where an author will cut and paste the exact same description into the next book. And it's like, and which is fine if you're reading them a year apart, but you know how some people will binge books and then you're reading the same description book after book. So I have Bible and I have my description, what book it came in. And then when I'm getting ready for the next one, so when she's got to look at herself and come up with her, she looked in the mirror with her light brown, hair. And I look at my Bible, it's like, oh, I did the mirror trick last time. So, okay. And then I put my new description in, put that in the Bible. So I can, number one, remember what the heck she looks like when I get, 2 years later for the next book, and don't repeat it, but I can pull key things out, because you've got to keep describing her for the faithful reader, for the new reader, but you don't want to bore the faithful reader using the same description. So that's how I do it.
Everything that Robin said, and I'll add, I've tried to stay away from mirrors, because I've seen that in, so I have a challenge. Yeah. I often have her looking in the armoire, right? And she'll be choosing, well, no, she's not going to use the, the sewer man's jumpsuit for this, going undercover. Is she going to take the sequin thing from Dior, or is she going to, and so I'll have her looking through clothes, depending on her job. She's going undercover. Often I have Martine, who's her best friend since the lycée. She'll be somewhere and borrowing clothes from Martine, and Martine's going, only you could pull this off. So get other characters. Renee is also often saying, you're not going to wear that, are you? Or something, to have it come from other people, to show also, to get some bang for your buck. But Bible, definitely, a Bible's so helpful.
Yeah. That's actually great advice. I'm taking notes. Okay.
I'm totally doing this now.
Saul, do you think that your protagonist, Nikki, do you think she is reflective of our times? Because she's one badass girl. She really is. Do you think she reflects the times?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that there would be some similarity there. It was kind of interesting for me, frankly, because I started a book and I came up with a character before the Me Too movement, but then the Me Too movement occurred and got big in the national consciousness while I was in the middle of editing it and working on a final draft and so forth. And so was on a personal level, it was exciting to feel that there was just this wonderful kind of, energy and upswell of, this national desire to, shine a light somewhere where it was in very bad need of being shined. And so I thought in some ways that it felt exciting to have a character who perhaps in some very, very small way, was reflective of that greater energy. But that was purely coincidental, I have to say. I do think that just in the last few years, and I don't want to take this, anywhere political or anything like that, but I think that there's just been a lot of, frustration within the country for very good reasons. And I think that if Nikki, and again, in some very small way, can tap into that and reflect that, and I think maybe just on a pure entertainment level, it can be fun and satisfying to read about a woman who is fighting for justice and doing things that she really believes in, right? And she's speaking up and acting on behalf of these women she runs into. Some of them are dear friends and some are complete strangers, but they're people who have been wronged and don't have anyone in their corner a lot of the time, and they're not able to fight back for themselves. And so I think in that sense, for me, it's certainly been satisfying from my perspective to be able to be writing some of those scenes and creating some of those moods. And I hope and would like to think that for readers running into Nikki in this day and age, she feels relatively contemporary. I think that a lot of her concerns as well, she's essentially, she lives in the Bay Area also, and she's a middle class, woman, small business owner. She has a used bookstore and she's living in the Bay Area. And I think that a lot of the things she sees in terms of what's going on with, the Silicon Valley just overtaking our entire, life and world, and, the basic things, property values, everything that's happening in California in terms of rising costs and income inequality and all of these things. I think that Nikki is noticing them. Certainly, again, she's contemporary in that sense. And those are certainly some of my concerns and preoccupations, and I'm happy for them to spill into the character.
Does anybody else want to take this? Do you think your protagonist reflects the times that you're writing her in? Anybody?
I try the Cussler Fargo series. They're sort of timeless. Okay, there's like 12. I think I'm working on the 13th book now in this series, and they literally don't age. I try to do everything I can not to put something that would tell when it took place. So no songs that were popular, no dates. Things are going to get dated anyway, but like cell phone technology, I'm sure. But the whole idea is that you should be able to, in this series, read any book out of order. And, it doesn't matter other than, maybe mentioning something. It's got to be sort of autonomous to the real times, I guess.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I have to say that when I write, I started writing in the 90s. I just kept moving slowly ahead by season. But I think each book, okay, we write a series, and mine turned out to be a series. I didn't know that, but I just kept writing, and she would just be changing. And I feel she really reflects. I think my books, I really try, and I hope that they reflect the 1990s in Paris, which were a very specific time, and I don't, it's like you read a Georges Simenon, Inspector Maigret, there's noir, they're in the 30s, and you're in a dark canal at night, the cobblestones. So, and you read that because of the atmosphere, right? You want that evocative feeling. And so mine are in the 90s, when a lot of things were breaking the surface about the Holocaust in France and in Europe, and people started talking about it because it was a shameful thing. It was, it was hidden. And so I couldn't write about the 90s unless I reflect the kind of world Aimé Leduc lived in. And that was in the paper when Jacques Chirac gave a big speech in 95, which kind of blew the lid off of all these things about retributions and collaboration. And that's when people started talking. So my books aren't Holocaust centered, but I do reflect that because those were in the newspaper every day, constantly is what people were talking about, is what people talk about at dinner. Families get together and start talking about that. You know, it's not so different from now, but I think if you have a date in a book, you've got to reflect what's going to be happening. What are you going to be seeing on the street, seeing in the newsstand, what hearing on the radio, what it's, and so your character is living in that world, and you need to reflect that, or you set it in 1970s Las Vegas and Sinatra's there. You know what I mean? It's there for a reason, right? And so I think that's really important. They need to reflect whatever time, you know, they're living in.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
have a time, you have to use it. And
Yeah.
you've got to use everything about it. And if you don't have a time, then you've got to make sure you don't, you know, reflect it. It's got to be able to kind of stand alone, no matter if you're reading it today or 10 years from today, you know, or 10 years ago. So
Right, not to make it dated, which is a real.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
I would have said gone with yes, it's very much of the time up until 2020 happened for my, so you know, I put a lot of effort into having my, you know, my protagonist is a very modern person. She's a digital native, you know, the comfort with technology and everything. And a lot of the fashions for artisan foods and all of that stuff is in the book. But she has a business of people making food, a tourism focused food business. And obviously in reality, 2020 has completely, but that would have a massive effect.
Yeah.
At the moment, I've just decided to leave it out.
I'm going to have to on mine, you know, you
Yeah,
can't
so
have 2020 in the middle of the Fargo series
Yeah.
because
Yeah, so I think I would, what was going to be a very of its time book is going to probably diverge onto a different timeline.
Well, or just do it timeless.
Yeah,
like
or I mean, I do try to be careful never to put like brand names. Like I never say Facebook or Instagram. It's always social media or photo sharing.
I actually do that. I don't have a problem with that as much as if you have, you know, say driving the, you know, a brand new 2020 Honda pickup or something like that. Then, you know, and you say it's new, now you've dated this book, or you put the pop song on, you know, kind of what Kara's doing in the 90s, but she's doing a period piece. So I think if you're writing today and you want to do a period piece, you want it to reflect today, you've got to do 2020. You got to do the masks and, you know, all this other stuff. But if you want to be timeless and hope that, you know, a year and a half from now, all this is going to be gone and people will never have to be reminded of 2020, you know, when they pick up one of your books, you got to leave it out.
You know, I always wonder about in the UK, because they have so many of those cameras, right? They have 10 times more street cameras than we do. I mean, it's like, seriously, how, I said once to Val McDermott, you know, at a BoucherCon, Val, how do you get away with, right? They have so many cameras for each person, right? I mean, that's a huge thing, right? If you're writing a current day, she goes, oh, people are always wearing hoodies, they're always broken, they don't work, you know, and all that. And I was like, so you have to deal with technology. I have a very limited, you know, reason. So I like
and
that.
you do have to deal with technology for today. But what were you going to say, Daisy, about?
Oh, I was just saying that with the brand, I guess, and maybe things have stabilized to the point where it isn't a problem. I just don't, you know, you don't want to have the book where people are logging onto their MySpace page or watching Vines or, you know, how long is TikTok going to last? I don't know, maybe 20 years.
Yeah. So, months. You know, and I guess you're right. I don't think I do mention Facebook. Definitely not TikTok, but I use cell phones, mobile. I'll do a video call, you know, those kind of things. So I use them, but I keep it generic.
Right. That's what
I mean. You know, yeah.
Right. I'm going to ask one more question, and then because it's 8:03, and I'm sure we have some questions out there, Lori, one of the Loris will tell me, but I want to know what cliches of women protagonists do you read in a book that makes you crazy? Is there anyone that leaps out at you where you just want to throw the book across the room? Saul, let's start with you.
All right, where to start? That's the real question. So, I mean, let me give you an example. I remember a couple of years ago, this was in the middle. This was just before the first Nikki book was coming out, and my girlfriend showed me a book written by a man about a female protagonist. And in the story, she had gone through this horrific set of hardships. Her sister had been murdered. You know, her life was collapsing. She's been up for 4 days without sleep trying to find the murderer who's now after her. Just about every bad position you could be in. And she's running through her house on her way out to continue solving this murder / running away from the killer. And she pauses and she looks in the mirror, and she's somehow like changing her shirt, and she starts to think, wow, it's a long time since I've had sex with anyone. So I'm not exaggerating the moment, and I'm purposely picking a pretty exaggerated moment, but just what this person was thinking, to suddenly say this is what my character needs to be thinking about, having
Was
been up for
was
4
that
days
a
in
male
situ.
author?
Oh yeah, of course it was.
Yeah. See, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, that
Yeah,
men
exactly.
think that
Yeah.
women think this way. And
Yeah.
it's like, really? You know, your life's in danger. And the woman's also like, oh, let's stop and kiss and have sex and whatever. It's like, no, you know, the bad guy's like right there, really. So
It's a
So what-
ridiculous thing, and I picked stereotype. I'm not exaggerating it because I read it in a book, but at the same time, I think that I think that sort of spearheads a much larger tendency that to me is incredibly problematic on a couple levels, ranging from completely silly to perhaps like pretty genuinely misleading about how people work,
Right.
how minds work, how genders work. And so that to me is just I can't run into that without feeling a lot of frustration for too many reasons to list in a 1-hour panel.
What about you, Kara? What jumps out at you when you read a book, the cliches that are out there about women?
Oh, about women. Yeah, well, that there's no woman who could be a sniper. That's why I wrote a sniper, because there are women who are snipers. But I was thinking about this. I love this author's writing. He's a very literary writer, but he has these books set in pre-war Paris, pre-war Europe. He's got spies, and it's always that the character, that the guy walks into the mansion, right? There's a big reception, and a woman who's gorgeous comes up and, has sex with him, like the next minute, in a coat room. And I'm like, that's your male fantasy. I'm sorry. It's too bad because you write great. I love how, but it's male fantasy. So I was like, I had to stop reading those books because I just don't think you meet at a reception and you go in a coat room. I don't know. But
well, there was that one. No.
But
Well, do we have Daisy? Do you want to answer any of that, or should we move on to questions? What do you
Well,
want?
there is, it's not necessarily a thing in books, but more in descriptions and reviews. But what absolutely sets my teeth on edge is when a woman is described as whip smart. You never hear a man described that way, and it always reads to me as girl and smart, and it's like, go to hell. If his character is intelligent, show me how. Don't just be like, oh, look, she's a smart girl. Sorry, that was me doing
No,
my.
I just want to thank Daisy for the title of our panel, A Suitable Job for a Woman.
Yes,
The first
Thank you.
mystery I read on my father's recommendation was An Unsuitable Job for a Woman by P.D. James, which I
Right.
loved.
Mm.
So thank you, Daisy.
That was really great. So do we have Lori? Any Lori?
I am here.
Do we have any questions, or should I go on? You tell me.
There is one question I can ask that right now. This
Okay.
is from Mark. He actually asked, directed toward Robin and Kara, how do you keep coming up with new and interesting ways to kill someone?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I ask that question every single time, because not just to kill somebody, but to get out of a sticky situation or something without doing what you've done before, and one up it. You know, you want it to be better than the last book, and you don't want to do the same exact thing as the last book. And it's not easy. Wouldn't you say, Kara?
Yeah, I mean, trying to kill someone in Paris and get away with it, hard, you know, it's really getting harder and harder. I often am with a friend and we'll be walking on the street and I'll see a, you know, a courtyard or something, and we'll go, I go, just lie down for me. And, you know, let me move some leaves here and see how long, you know, and my friends are used to it by now, but, or breaking into a park at night, we've done that. So I'm trying to get my, you know, my inspiration for a murder from the location. What makes it Parisian? What would happen in Paris? How could you be hidden for a certain period of time? But yeah, it's keeping it fresh, and keeping myself interested. How can I do something different and be interested myself to write it?
I had gosh, it must have been 20 something odd years ago. I read a newspaper article. Sometimes life is the best place to get ways, because people amaze me all the time on the ways they come up to kill other people. And there was this one article that I read at this writers' convention in Orange County. It was in the newspaper. And I read this thing and I thought, oh my gosh, this would make a great mystery for, you know, some book. And I held on to that for years and years and years. And that is actually the murder that takes place in The Last Good Place, which is the Streets of San Francisco book. So sometimes it comes from real life. Other times, you know, just kind of like what you say, okay, let's see, how can I make it fit, you know, whatever this is. So.
Yeah, but one more thing. When I went to see a movie about 10 years ago down at Embarcadero somewhere, we came out and there was a big giant paper shredder, like at midnight, you know, they go to all the big offices and banks downtown and shred the paper, you know, in those big like semi trucks. And I went, I got it, that's perfect. We throw a body in a shredder, you know, that would be great. I couldn't use it because of course in Paris they didn't have shredders in the 90s and blah, blah, blah. But finally in my last Amy book, I got to use a shredder. They use industrial for like tires, giant heavy rubber tires. And I was like, I'm getting the shredder in there somehow, you know, and it was heavy duty shredder, you know.
Well, is there anything that your protagonist would do that you don't do? In other words, if you're like, for instance, Daisy, you say this, she's kind of you. Claudia's kind of you. But what is she going to do that you don't do or wouldn't do?
She'll say more things to people's face.
You do that?
She's somewhat more confrontational than I am, which is probably going to make some people laugh because I'm not.
She has to say all the things that we want to say, but don't.
And she knows that's a bad idea. And then and of course, because what you're doing a lot of times in books is getting your protagonist into worse problems. And sometimes she does that by saying the things she's thinking.
Saul, is that true? What does Nikki do that you wouldn't do?
So many things. Gosh, if I see someone order a vodka martini, I'll keep my mouth shut, but Nikki will certainly call them out for not using gin. So that's one of many. I think, yeah, she probably tends to speak her mind in general a little bit more than I do, and she's far, far better at me than at shooting pool.
Oh, that's interesting, because you had that whole big scene where she beats everybody at pool. Now, I thought that maybe you were a good pool player from that. You're not?
This is the part where I should obviously be lying. I am an enthusiastic pool player, but I would not want to switch enthusiasm for a talent by any means.
Well, how much, we've already said how much, no, we haven't. How much of this protagonist, all of yours, are you there? How much of you is inside Amy? Kara, how much of you is Amy?
Probably a lot, you know, probably my alter ego. Again, she does things I would never do. But Renee always, you know, talks to her about being so tactless. You know, she's very tactless. And I kind of think I am often, has been told by people, you're a little tactless, you know. But I think Amy is an outsider. Well, she is an outsider in Paris because she's half French, half American. She's doing a job that is not a typical woman's job. When I started writing these, there were only 3 female detectives, private detectives in Paris. And now there are more, but they're not a lot. And they're kind of, I don't want to say neither fish nor fowl, but Amy fits in that category. She's doing a non-traditional job. She's half American. She was raised by a father who was a policeman. She grew up on, you know, Friday nights, her father playing cards in the apartment, sitting on the lap of these cops and hearing that world. She was raised by men. So she's kind of an outsider. And so I know when I go to Paris, I am not French. I am an outsider. And probably that's how I can write, because I notice things as an outsider. You know, I see things that if you live there, you don't. I mean, if I was going to write about San Francisco, it would be so hard because I live here. You know, I think people say, write about San Francisco. And I'm like, I'd have to be a tourist in my own hood. You know what I mean? To see that, to notice things. So, but I'm always an outsider in Paris. Yeah, I'm very familiar. I understand a lot. I can, you know, wear a trench coat and good boots and get away with looking Parisian for about 5 minutes. But you know, there's always something. And I think that's good, because if you don't firmly belong, then you observe. So I share that outsiderness with her.
That's interesting. Well, Robin, you were a policewoman. You have one a policewoman, the other one is a forensic. So how much of you is in your protagonists?
I would have to say a lot. I think my characters have my morals, my moral values. So, you know, when I was a police officer, there were certain lines I wouldn't cross. But they're also better, braver. You know, I would go home and cry, and, you know, I guess they might go home and cry, but it was fictional. So, I did try to, I worried that people would think, especially in the Kate Gillespie series, that people would think, oh, you're just writing about yourself. So I made her 2 inches shorter and a size 12 pants, which was like 2 sizes bigger than me, because it's that nobody will figure this one out, because they won't be able to say that. Of course, now I'm so much bigger than her. And I'm still taller, but I'm pretty sure I'm wearing a bigger size than her these days. You know, but she gets to say the things that I always wanted to say, and, you know, because you get the time to be able to think of it. And I am an insider because I'm working the job, but like Kara, I am really an outsider observing, because the men do not let the women into this tight little circle. And so being able to put my point of view on it, what I observed, then that's what Kate and Sydney got to observe, and a little bit what Veroni gets to observe, you know, in her life, which is completely different. That's a whole different ball game. So, but yeah, that.
Oh, okay. Lori, do we have any other questions? Was that the only one that anybody had to ask? I have more. I can go on.
There was another one posted, actually. Kara, I saw you reading that one. Did you get that question?
Oh yeah, so I just saw that. It says talk about how I come up with the character names in the books. Well, okay, so a long time ago, my friend was in Paris, was throwing out her phone books. Remember when we had phone books, you know, like white pages and yellow pages? And she had them on her landing. And I said, why are you throwing those out? She said, well, I have a new one. I said, can I have it? So I have the 1995 Paris phone books, the yellow pages, really big, les pages jaunes, and the white pages, which I had to buy a whole suitcase and bring it home in the suitcase. But it's
those are brilliant. Yeah, that's what I used to use, was phone books back in the
phone
day.
books, right? So you get your names in there. So you know, that's where I get a lot of names. And of course, also the generations have older names. But until maybe it was, and I can't remember the year, 60s or 70s or 80s, you could only name children, it was a law, or maybe it was the 60s, you know, a saint's name. So, because everybody in France has a saint when they're born. Saint Anne is, it's her saint's day. You get a special little present. It's not just your birthday, it's your name day. So, but that has changed, and now, you know, they can have other names. So that was very, very difficult because there were only so many names, only so many saints that you could take the names from, right? So then you have Paul, and you have Jean-Paul, and Claude, and Claude Jean, and, you know, you were always having to hyphenate names too to get that. So that's what I have to have the Bible. I have to have those names, so I'm not having Paul or Jean-Claude, you know, 20 times. So it's easier now, but then it wouldn't reflect that time.
Any other questions there? I think you covered that one well. I use it
Actually, I love to hear, if you guys don't mind indulging me. Oh, wait, Daisy, Camille is actually asking, have you ever written about fairies?
Now, why on earth would Camille ask that question?
I wonder.
Yes, in my degenerate youth, I wrote a murder mystery, A Set Among Flower Fairies, and Camille very kindly read it for me, and was very helpful and encouraging.
Oh, that's great. So there's another question as well, but before we move on to Andrew's question, could the rest of you just talk really quickly about how you come up with your character names as well? Because it's fascinating to me.
well, gee, Robin, how do you do it?
Well, I used to use phone books, baby books. I have probably 6 or 7 baby books, that big ones, and then the internet too. Since I'm doing this international series, I need international names. So I'll be looking up what's a Hungarian surname, what's a Hungarian, you know, girl name, boy name, and that sort of thing. So many places.
Yeah, Saul, how did you come up with Nikki? I like that. I'd like to know that.
You know, Nikki was one of the few names where I didn't spend really any meaningful time thinking about it. It just kind of came to me and seemed to fit really well. And on the rare occasions when something works, I try not to second guess or overthink it. The last name, I like that it, you know, projects a kind of fierceness, which I think was important for the character, and that to me was something that I wanted to come across. But yeah, that was one of the few names where it just kind of came along with the character, and I don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And when those things happen, I'm more than happy to take it and move on. I think in general for characters, I'll do a lot of the tricks that others have been talking about. Certainly with the dearth of phone books in the world, if I'm thinking of a certain character from a certain, you know, ethnicity, or a certain, you know, place in the world, or a certain nationality, then I'll pull up, you know, a list of 1,000 most common surnames or something like that, and just kind of skim through them until I see something that seems to click. And just that's, you know, no method to the madness, I'd say.
Yeah, that's how I do it too. I have phone books. The internet is marvelous for that. You know, just go look up any name in the world. It's wonderful. It doesn't even take much brilliance here to go find a name anymore. And also, Saul, I want to say that Nikki actually could be a man's name. So I thought it was an interesting choice for either a male or a female. I mean, she's definitely very female, but I just thought that was an interesting choice. It wasn't, well, Daisy or Heather, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I went with, you know, chose this spelling especially just to have something slightly different. Again, maybe just to kind of suggest that this character is a little different from the norm, that, you know, average. But yeah, I like the fact that it has some versatility to it. When the book came out, I was contacted by a Nikki Griffin, who I think she lives in Scotland. I'm pretty sure it's Scotland, and she was very excited to finally be seeing her name in print.
Ah, that's nice. So are there any other ones, or should I go on? What are we doing? It's 8:23. Tell me, somebody talk to me.
So
Hello.
there is another question directed at Robin. What are the
Okay.
challenges of working with an existing storyline in the Clive Cussler series, with Clive Cussler?
Those are big challenges, because this is there was 8 books, I think, when I started, or I started on number 8. So I had to read all the previous ones, and you know, you've got to make sure that you keep the storylines and the character, you know, all the little intricacies. If you don't get it right, the readers will catch you on it. So the other thing I did was I went and read all the Amazon reviews for the previous books, because the readers will catch you on it. And there were 3 co-authors prior to me. There was the original co-author, who was Grant Blackwood. And so, you know, you have to kind of take his books as the Bible, because this is, you know, he and Clive have established this world. And then the next 2 authors came along and things got changed. And I noticed it because I'm reading these books going boom, boom, boom. So, but I also knew that readers would pick up on things that I didn't pick up on. So I went and read all the Amazon reviews and took out the things that they noticed. It's like, how come, you know, this happened, and why is this happening? Because this was established, you know, people, they pay attention to these things. So yeah.
Exactly. That's an interesting question. Absolutely. How you pick up from somebody, how do you take over? That's amazing.
And then another thing I did was when I found one of the authors changed something significantly, whether he just didn't read the previous books or didn't notice this was done in the previous books, but then he went and changed it, and it stuck out like such a sore thumb. You know, a reader had pointed it out, I had noticed it, so now I've got to deal with it in my book. So what I did was I explained it like, they decided to try this, but it didn't work out, so they're going back to, you know, this, and that way, you know, there's an explanation for, oh, whoops, somebody blew it here, but you don't want to say, oh, they blew it. So
Yeah.
Smart. That's smart.
thank you.
Yes, it is very smart. Anything else, Lori? Any other questions that we should pay attention to?
Nicola Davis is wondering if you are plotters or pantsers, and do you have an arc for your series, or do the books just come out one by one? So who out there is the mythical unicorn of a plotter?
What?
Pantser. I'm a
Yeah.
pantser, and as I say, I didn't know I was writing a series. So now I'm you know, working on the 20th and 21st series book in Amy's world. Now the baby's growing, and so yeah, there needs to be an arc in her story. I've always, and I think I'm getting there. It has to do with her family. It's about family. What I realized about her mother, how she's come to terms with that, her father's murder, who's keeping the truth from her, and raising her daughter, which motherhood has sort of forced her to deal with those things. And of course, I didn't want her to have the baby. My editor kept saying, go on, shake it up in her world, make her deal with these things. And so then I kept saying, oh, what if she loses the baby? And my editor wouldn't let her lose the baby or anything. So it's sort of made Amy have to come to terms. So I think the arc of the series will be her facing some very difficult things, and she's gonna, I don't know, she could go either way. So that's hard to do for me, but I think that will be really fresh and it will make it alive. Because I don't know myself.
Well, are we continuing with that? Daisy, do you want to take that?
I guess I sort of consider myself chaotic neutral when it comes to plotting. I try to come up with a plot to begin with, but then I don't really write it out, and then I sort of make up outline things as I'm glad my agent was watching this, but I think she's gone. So yeah, and I just kind of chuck plot points into the writing document as I go, and hope I get to them at some point. I'm not completely pantsing, but I'm not plotting very well, I guess is the answer.
Yeah, Paul? No, Paul. Who? Paul? Who the hell is
He's over there.
Oh,
I've always said that I think that if I could outline and plot, my life would be so much less stressful, and I'm really meaning that. I think it'd be wonderful if I was able to look at a bulleted row of scenes and say, okay, this is happening, and then this is happening, and this is the ending that I'm working towards. And I just can't do that. And to me, the way I learn about the book and the way I learn about the characters within the book is by writing them and by writing the scenes. And so, I think of it as, essentially driving a car at night, where I don't need to see the end of the road where I'm trying to wind up. I just have to have the headlights picking up then 20 feet in front of me so I don't go off the road or hit a deer or anything else like that. So that's my rough style, I'd say, when I'm writing.
Didn't you once say that, and I don't remember who the writer was, that he liked to put all the characters in one room and see what they were going to say to each other and what they were going to do? Was that you who said that?
You have an amazing memory. I can't believe it. Yeah.
I take that.
Stephen King. That's a favorite quote.
Yeah, really. But isn't it true? Isn't that what you said that he did? He just throws his characters in a room and sees what happens?
Yeah. That's a favorite Stephen King quote of mine, that he likes to just drop everyone in and kind of see what they do. And to me, I've always kind of felt like that's a really perfect way to talk about that style of writing. And for him, he can know what they're going to do because they're characters, and each one has to kind of do what they're going to do within whatever situation, comes up. And so to me, I think that's a really fun way to put it, and also a pretty fun way to write.
Well, it's 8:30 now. Are we going to be leaving? Because I want to ask what everybody's doing next. Or if we're not leaving, I want Robin to tell us whether she's a pantster. Okay, so what are we doing, Lori?
Let's have Robin. I would love to hear Robin's answer, and then you can go ahead and ask your last question, Heather. And then if we have time, we'll go back to the questions in the chat.
It's so nice to have a leader. Thank you. Robin, are you a pantster?
I'm a little bit of both. So working with Clive, sometimes he'd have a synopsis, sometimes he'd have me do a synopsis, and this last book that I just started, they wanted a synopsis first, and it's like I started the computer screen for 2 months, and I finally emailed the agent and said, look, you want the book or you want a synopsis, because you don't get both. And so what I do is I start writing, and then they still require a synopsis because they have to give it to all the art people and that sort of thing. And so then I will start writing a synopsis as I go along, and then I will try to plot it out a little bit further than I've written, and then I'll kind of write toward it, but both are very fluid. So that's how I work. And one of the things that's really helped me a lot, though maybe it hasn't, now that I think about it, I write in Scrivener, and Scrivener is this writing program. So Word, you're on one long document, or maybe you're writing every chapter or something like that. And in Scrivener, you have this whole, you can see this binder, and I now write in scenes because I do not write linear. I try to write linear, and then, like I said, I go from point A and I'm trying to get to point B and I can't get there. So I'll just write, well, I know I'm going to be doing this soon, and I'll write this scene next, and then I'll connect the dots. And then Scrivener allows you to kind of drag and drop these scenes, and it repopulates the manuscript, and it kind of works the way I work, which is chaotic. So.
Okay, good. So what's next? Daisy, what's next for you?
Next is Marketplace book number 2. Hard at work on it. Trying to get the words out in the craziness of 2020, but
you have a
deadline. Adventures of Claudia. Sorry.
Do you have a deadline for it? Don't
Yes,
you?
I do. First deadline of my writing life. It is an interesting new thing.
Ah. Okay, Kara, what about you? What's next for you?
The next Amy is written. It comes out November 21, which is the one set in post 9/11 Paris.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's with my editor, so I'm waiting for copy edits. And I'm flirting with the idea of I don't want to say sequel, because I don't think that's the right word, but the next story of Kate Reese, who has appeared in 3 Hours in Paris, the Oregonian sniper. So I'm trying to find a place in history that she might visit during World War II. So I wouldn't call it a sequel. It's just like number 2. Number 2.
Wow.
It could be
Oh my-
post-war. It could be during the war. I'm still searching for that hinge for the story, but I
Wow.
think she's got some legs to go.
Robin, what's next, babe? Who are you doing?
Working on the next Sam and Remy Fargo book, sadly this time without Clive, who passed away in February. So
Oh,
so it's been really tough, I mean, just 2020 in general, and then
Yeah.
him not being here to help. So anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, Saul?
So I have Nikki #2, the sequel coming out this spring called One Got Away, and that was a lot of fun for me to get back into the saddle with her. And she's trying to chase down a con man after being hired by kind of a shadowy San Francisco billionaire family. And so I've had a lot of fun with that. At the moment, I'm working on a third Nikki, and I've been pursuing a standalone that I've had the idea for a number of years, and I've been doing them not simultaneously, but I've been trying to make progress, on both at once. Like I said, I grew up in a pretty small New Hampshire town, and I've always thought it would be a really wonderful place to set a book. And so I've been, rather than having Nikki somehow need to move to New Hampshire for a year, which might stretch reality too far, I've been trying to work on this different idea as well.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I think we're officially over. I want to thank my incredible, talented panel. You are so interesting. I could actually stay with you for another hour, but I want a martini. I have a martini.
you
But
did
I
a
want-
wonderful job, Heather. Thank you so
Thank
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Oh,
That's
God. Well,
all.
it's easy with you guys. It was easy, a piece of cake. Let me tell you, but thank you for that. Thank you, Daisy. Good luck with everything you're doing, you sweet, and all your fairies. Ah, right? Okay.
The secret's out.
Kara, I just love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. You are such a wonderful writer and a great person.
Thank you.
Robin, it's been so good seeing you. I have loved you
Aw,
ever
thank
since
you.
Sacramento. Remember that? Well,
Yeah.
it's just wonderful. I adore you. And Saul, you the man. That's all I could say about you. I have loved everything.
You
and I
held
love
your own in this all-female panel. Good job, Saul.
Yeah, and you held your own, baby.
Yeah.
You really held your own. So I'm turning it over to whomever. And thank you again. We've loved being here. I've learned a lot of stuff. I hope you have too. And we will see you around the cookie farm. Who's taking it over? Oh, Lori.
Here I
Lori.
am.
Hi. Okay, go